On this day in history, November 24th, 1642, Abel Tasman becomes the first European to discover the island Van Diemen's Land, later renamed Tasmania. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica going over the history of the island. Tasmania, or as it was originally called, Van Diemen's Land, was discovered in 1642 by the Dutch navigator Tasman, who named the territory after his patron, Van Diemen. In the 18th century, the island was visited by French and English explorers, including Captain Cook in 1777. The news that the French explorer, Baudin, had surveyed the south of the island in 1800 stimulated the British to forestall the French. In 1802, the Cumberland, a small schooner, landed at King's Island in Bass Strait, and in 1803, Lieutenant Bowen was sent by Governor King of New South Wales to form a settlement on the south coast of Van Diemen's Land. In 1807, Colonel Patterson occupied Fort Dalrymple on the north side of the island. During the same year, Colonel Collins, who had failed in an attempt to colonize the shores of Fort Phillip, transferred his soldiers, convicts, and officials to that neighborhood of Hobart, and was appointed commandant of the infant settlement. The difficulties of the settlers were increased by the hostility of the blacks. The first collision took place at Risdon, a few days after the landing of Lieutenant Bowen's expedition, and for this the white settlers were entirely responsible. Hostilities between the races were incessant from 1802 to 1830. In 1831, George Robinson induced the remnant of the blacks to leave the mainland and take refuge first in South Bruni and subsequently in Flinders Island, their numbers having been diminished from 5,000, the original estimate of the aboriginal population, to 203. The last pure-blood Tasmanian died in 1876, at the age of 76. The growth of population was extremely slow, and in 1808, a census allowed that there were only 3,240 people on the island, all told. Soon settlers began to arrive, and as their number in the colony increased, an agitation arose for more political freedom and improved administration, in consequence of which, in 1822, courts-martial were replaced by courts of justice, and in 1825 the colony was made independent of New South Wales, Colonel Arthur being appointed governor. In 1828, the Van Diemen's Land Company commenced sheep farming on a large scale in the northwest district of the island under a charter granted 3 years before, and in 1829 the Van Diemen's Land establishment obtained a grant of 40,000 acres at Norfolk Plains for agriculture and grazing. In 1834, Portland Bay on the mainland of Australia was occupied by settlers from Van Diemen's Land, and in 1835 there was a migration, large when compared with the population of the island, to the shores of Port Phillip, now Victoria. At that date, the population was 40,172, a large population being convicts, for in 4 years 15,000 prisoners had been landed. The colony was prosperous, but the free settlers were not at all satisfied with the system of government, and an agitation commenced in Van Diemen's Land, as well as in New South Wales, for the introduction of representative institutions and the abolition of transportation. This system was abolished in New South Wales in 1840, and in the island, which in the interim had been the receptacle for convicts from the United Kingdom, India, and the colonies, in 1853. In the same year, representative institutions were introduced, and the colony was renamed Tasmania. 3 years later, responsible government was created. The discovery of gold in Victoria had the effect of causing the value of exports to the colony to rise from £665,790 in 1851 to £1,765,316 in 1853. While the population diminished, young men and women of all classes migrating to the Australian mainland. In the 60s, Tasmania embarked upon a new period of prosperity, owing to the discovery in its western half of coal in 1850 and gold in 1852. Later political history, until the colony became in 1901 part of the Commonwealth of Australia, was not important. The colony has a citizen defense force of about 1,700 officers and men forming part of the Australian Army. It furnished contingents both in the South African War and the World War.